I am a poor wayfaring stranger, while traveling through this world of woe. Yet there's no sickness, toil, or danger in that bright world to which I go. I know dark clouds will gather round me. I know my way is rough and steep, but golden fields lie out before me, where God's redeemed shall ever sleep.
Hello and welcome to Tea Time Theology. This season we are talking through Star Trek Strange New World. In this episode we're going to talk through the second episode of the season called Children of the Comet. And I'm joined with Taylor.
Hey.
And the Reverend Drake Douglas.
Hello.
Awesome. So let's just start with sort of like first impressions of the episode. How did people feel after watching it?
Big fun.
Yes.
This episode is big fun.
Big fun, big feels. There's a lot. We got a lot to cover.
There's a lot happening.
There's a lot going on here.
I loved it. Well, let's start just at the beginning with this like beautiful family dinner.
Yeah, the cooking scene, we talked in the last episode a lot about Pike's humanity and as a leader, and this, I think, is just a quintessential example, right? He intuitively knows that it's important for him to be hospitable as a leader to the people he depends on. He sort of opens up his personal life to some degree. Like, to have people into your space, into your home, is not a small thing, like that's especially in a setup like a starship where it's like the only personal space you have, right? I mean, it's a floating dorm, really.
Which is like apparently on, I don't know what happens to the Enterprise between now and when Kirk gets there.
Right.
But like Pike's quarters are enormous.
Awesome. It's a fireplace. There's a real fire in it, or maybe it's hologram. I don't know, but
It's good. I'm like, I would join Starfleet just for the accommodations.
They're not bad.
Watch TOS. You'll be shocked by how small it actually is.
Yeah, it's.
I don't know. Free housing with any job sounds good right now.
Right.
It's not the worst perk in the world. But anyway, so Pike is cooking. It reminds me a lot of. So I am the Episcopal chaplain at the University of Rhode Island, and our Wednesday campus gatherings. I'm kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall. It's my first year. I'm sort of newly ordained priest.
You should probably put that on the plate.
Don't know, right? Yeah, that would be better on the plate. Spaghetti is always a popular dinner, and it was just the easiest thing in the world to say. Well, I'll cook, I'll cook and I'll feed people, and this will, and it has really been amazing. The students are, even if it's not like the most exciting or haute cuisine sort of meal, it's and they've said it to me, like the fact that it's homemade, the fact that you make it, or that it's not out of the box, or it is, that's all that matters, which is of course very heartwarming to hear. And so Pike is doing this, right? He's and what I really love about this scene is that they're on a starship with matter replicators that can literally make anything. It can make anything. It can make food. It can make any kind of food you want. It can make anything. And
you say it, it's there.
Right. And he's cooking. Like, he's actually doing the act of cooking, and he's going out of his way to do this. And so, the only point to make is just like, for any leader listening, that's a good leader, right? Yeah. Someone who's willing to sort of do the hard work, to do the connecting. Because if you're going to depend on people in hard times, you've got to have a deeper connection to people and really know who they are. And I think this is just a great example of how to do that.
Absolutely. This is a big deal. Like you said, it is a big deal. Like, cooking on a starship isn't first of all, isn't an easy task. But also, like you said, it's not common. But this is pike cooking is a continuation of other great leaders using this as a way to get to know people on their staffs. Pike cooks for his crew, Riker cooks for his friends, Cisco cooks for the people on Deep Space Nine. They're literally performing a labor of love. It's not something they're like, oh, I'll cook tonight because I have to eat. It's I'm cooking tonight for everybody, and especially he's like Pike's making ribs. Ribs are incredibly difficult to cook, even with the best setup you can have on a planet in a house. But he's cooking ribs on the starship, and he's going to feed everyone like a nice rib dinner, and he gets others involved. Hammer is cutting the carrots and the vegetables. Spock is doing something. It's just a great family meal.
Yep.
And I feel like even like in the Bible as well, we see a lot of dinners. We see my girl Martha, who I love, also gets a bad rap. I'm like here for the villain arcs of the Bible. Martha and Mary, we see that. We see like obviously the Last Supper, like the most well known. So I think it's also, and even like where I work, we're always like, even though grants don't want to pay for food, like we're always like, you have to feed people. Like if you want people to come to stuff, you need to give them food. And I think that is so interesting. And also I feel like, and again, if I'm wrong, please tell me that my hot take is not real.
Well,
but like,
we're Star Trek fans, we will tell you you're wrong.
But I feel like on a place like Starfleet, it's very easy to eat meals alone as well. So I think there's not just this idea of like cooking for them, but also like gathering people together, because this feels like a type of job where you're like have to eat in rotation. Because someone always has to be like in charge of directing where the ship's going. So like it doesn't also feel like you are normally eating with other people as well.
Right. Yeah. Meals are where things happen. Right. I mean, meals are where we all must necessarily approach a meal from a place of vulnerability. Right. I mean, we need to eat, even if it would be very convenient if we didn't. Right. Except that we do, all of us, no matter what, no matter how important you are, how much power you have, or like it's the great leveler, right, of being a human, is that you have to eat, and so it's almost like this disarming, even if we don't think about it, right? Everyone is gathering in one place, whether it's out of a labor of love or anything, because they need something in common. And I think this is particularly why meals are so theological. We see so much about, yes, the Last Supper then becomes the Eucharist. And so we are, in a way, doing a meal thing every Sunday. And because of this great combination of like need and giving and gathering and all of these things. So yeah, meals, cook for your friends, cook for your family, get people around a table. Like meals are where the good stuff happens.
Absolutely. I didn't realize how much I loved feeding people until this summer. Because this summer I got into barbecue in like a big way. I got myself a smoker. And all of a sudden, like I'm like having barbecues like every 2 weeks, having people over, and it's just so rewarding to gather folks together like that.
Yeah, no, my sister, my family's pretty close knit, but my sister and her fiance come over every Sunday night. So we do like the core 5 family dinner every sort of Sunday night, and it is sort of like its own ritual in a certain way to sort of like have people be able to like come over and eat. I don't know. I think food's just really fascinating, and the way we react around it.
Absolutely. Speaking of the food scene, this is definitely Uhura's episode.
Yes, a queen.
Yes.
For those who know, everyone knows how important Uhura is. For those who don't know, Uhura is she is a legacy character. We are getting an intro into how Uhura became the Uhura that we know and love for the original series. R.I.P. Nichelle Nichols. She died a couple of years ago. and she was killing it ever since. The best, the story of Ivy, you might know this, but this is just an inspiring story about Nichelle Nichols. Nichelle Nichols was on the original Star Trek. She was on the first season. She really wasn't feeling the vibe. And she was like, you know what, I think I'm done. One of her good friends said, you know, Nichelle, I think it's like really important that you stick in with this role. There's not a lot of black representation on TV right now, especially not black representation in leadership. It's very important that you stick in this role and you see it out to the end. And she ended up doing that. Ivy, do you know who that friend was?
Was it Whoopi Goldberg?
It was Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh, God. No, because Whoopi also said something about this as well later.
Whoopi Goldberg was inspired by Nichelle Nichols.
There we go. I knew she was going to come in something.
She did. She would run
as our favorite bartender, you know.
Right,
Yeah,
and then she
right.
became in Star Trek as Guinan. My wife watches Star Trek, and when I'm watching it, she'll say, "Is this a Guinan?" And I'm all like, "Yeah, it's a Guinan," and she'll come and sit and watch a Guinan. But yeah, she was inspired because she said when she was growing up, Whoopi would watch Star Trek and say, "Look, Mom, there's a black woman on TV, and she's not cooking or cleaning. She's like doing a job, and she's in charge." And it was very inspiring.
It is.
But anyway, but Uhura's continuing the theme of Uhura caring about folks from the last episode. Uhura is. She goes in and she sees Hammer, who is a
Andorian? Is that-
yes.
Yeah.
He's
Wow,
I
impressed myself with
He's a
that.
light. Yeah, right. He's a light-skinned Andorian.
Yeah.
But his particular brand of Andorian is blind, and she knows that, and she runs over and she says, "Oh my God, can I help you?" Because he's cutting things with a knife, and she's like, "Blind man with a knife, let's help him out." And they kind of like push back in like a funny way about that, and I just think that just shows how much the scene from the turbo left in the previous episode isn't just like a one-off. Uhura cares a lot about people and wants to help any way that she can, and I think that's just really great about her.
But I also like in that scene, like, yes, Spock and Hammer like kind of come at her a little bit, but then she like definitely has the last laugh in the end. She's like, "Okay, great, yes, I'm in the wrong outfit, I'm here, I get it, haha, let's laugh at the new kid, please have a better hobby," and like walks away. And I just like love that for her too, because like personally I hate pranks. I don't think they're funny. I usually just find them annoying, and they're usually cruel.
Well, joke's on you,
So-
Ivy. We've never uploaded any episode ever of this show.
You know what? That's fine. I've had a great 7 seasons. But I think that, like, what she's sort of saying is, like, really interesting of, like, okay, yeah, we get it. I'm the new kid. Let's, like, move on. And I also think what's interesting about that scene is that it's also showing, like, the coming up of 2 different cultures. Where, like, and she even says that. She's like, oh, like, where I'm from, like, this would actually be seen as this. And then Hammer's like, well, where I'm from, it's seen as this. And, like, I think that's also what's so interesting about this episode is it just shows, like that 10-second scene tells us what the entire 45 minutes is going to be about.
Right.
Because it, like, lets us know, like, this is sort of, like, the thesis statement of the episode is, like, how do 2 different cultures sort of come together to, like, do this one thing.
Right.
So we kind of touched about it in the last episode, but there's there's just like great stories. They're telling stories in the scene around the table about, like, you know, Starfleet, and Pike tells this great story about how, like, he's really bad at security, and, like, he's chasing a Nausicaan and is not wearing pants, and he trips on the Nausicaaan's pants, and then says like, maybe security isn't for you, and everyone laughs, and of course Spock doesn't get it because Spock's Vulcan and he doesn't understand humor.
Jokes are hard.
Yeah, jokes are hard for Spock. Even though he was slaying pretty hard with
he had some
Hammer
good
earlier.
ones.
Oh my
Like,
God, he's so funny. He's the only one who doesn't know he's funny.
and you just nailed Spock.
Yeah.
Like you don't that's
why
whole Spock's whole vibe. Like, he just says stuff and it's like, this is hilarious, but Spock doesn't understand he's being hilarious.
No.
But there is a scene where Pike kind of asks asks Uhura, says, hey, where you want to be in 5 years? And Uhura says
10 years, because it's
10
when
years.
he's dead.
Oh, that's right. He has that whole, like,
And he has
he's
this
like, where are you
whole-
going to be in 10? And then he dies.
That was poignant. If not a little heavy-handed.
It was a little, I was like, really, we just got that whole plot last episode.
Right.
Well, you got to think when they were releasing it, there was a week in between episodes.
Right,
and
right,
I might
right.
not have remembered, and every Trek, and this is something that Trek used to do. Every Trek used to say, like, treat every episode like this is someone's first Trek. Like, don't assume they know.
Right.
Explain.
I appreciate that.
So he reiterates 10 years, but he has that little hiccup. I think he was just burping. I don't think he was actually worried about it. But they ask her, where you want to be in 10 years, and she says, I don't even know if I want to be in Starfleet. And that's like mic drop. Like, you're sitting on a ship, you're sitting on the flagship of the Federation with, like, this is the A team. You are like, this team goes to finals every year, And like, well, it's like, wow. And it kind of stirred the question in me. Drake, question is for you. While you were in seminary, were you or did you ever meet anybody in the same kind of place as Uhura? In the last episode, you said that sometimes people run to the priesthood. They're as if they're running away from something, and then they get there and it's not quite what they think or what they wanted, or they're not sure this is the place for them. So did you ever meet anybody in the same place as Uhura, or have you ever found yourself in that place that Uhura is in, where she's not sure, like she's kind of using Starfleet as a stopgap?
Yep. I love this. I love Uhura's honesty in this, and I think that to answer your question, my deep belief is that all of us felt that way, and maybe still do in seminary. And not everyone in seminary was on an ordination kind of track. I mean, some people were there to just advance their knowledge and their study, and they had no kind of intention or no goal to be ordained. But for those of us who were, I think it's the healthiest approach, right? Is to constantly sort of be like, why am I doing? Discernment doesn't stop. Ideally, the moment that committee stamps your paperwork, right? I mean, and I think, unfortunately, and it's not just in our denomination or probably even in our religion. Unfortunately, I think that kind of happens a lot. It's like, okay, I like sort of quote unquote like made it through, and now here I am. But that discerning, who we are called to be, whether that's an ordained ministry or lay ministry or any combination of that, is an ongoing process. I mean, that's a function of prayer. That's a function of discipleship. That's a function of just kind of everyday stuff. I will say, watching the people who had no degree of this questioning were often the people who did the most harm in our community at the seminary. So people who had, either convinced themselves or sort of like, this is what I'm supposed to do, this is what I was made for, this is, what God's calling me to do, and if you get in my way, watch out, sort of thing. And so I think Uhura is really teaching us a really gracious approach to discernment, right? Is discerning, and discernment happens in a lot of different ways. Discernment definitely happens internally and ideally in a prayerful way. God will speak to you in specific ways. Discernment is also necessarily an external process where those who are in the community or kind of have an eye or have knowledge of what's needed will often tell you, hey, I see this thing in you. And sometimes it's the first time you've heard that, right? So we see a lot of that happening with the officer crew in Uhura. She's the only reason she's on the Enterprise is because she's like a stellar cadet. She's not even out of school yet. She's basically like an intern, right? And
right. They say she beat out thousands of applicants to be on the Enterprise.
Right. And so what I think I love about her is that she clearly doesn't let that go to her head. It's not always super difficult to sort of be impressive or pull ahead of the pack or anything like that, especially in a church that's sort of in our predicament, right? We know numbers have been down, we're sort of like down on ourselves, and so to have any kind of like new fresh energy can be very alluring to everyone in the room, right? But what that doesn't, what I don't think is an invitation there to do is to just say, oh, lucky me, people are excited about me, now I don't need to think or discern about this anymore. And so Ahura is really showing us, I think, a perfectly faithful and healthy approach to leadership, whether that's in the church or outside of it, where people believe in you, but like that's a two-way street, right? You know, and it's okay to take time to make sure those things ideally begin to align a little bit.
And I think what Spock says too is so great, which is like, if it is not your path, move aside so someone else can.
Right.
And I think that is so interesting to think about, because I think there's a lot of times where people, I think there's a study that by the time you retire, you will have had 4 different careers.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's sort of like the industry standard at this point. So I think there is sort of this idea that like people can change who they are, what they want to do, their minds. And I think Spock, in his very like dry way, was able to sort of pinpoint exactly what it is that like you're here now and that's great, but also like if this isn't for you, like there are other people who want this as well.
Yes. And I actually think I love that point, and I think we can also, especially in the church, in our current kind of current climate, how we're trying to address and think about our future, how we're building up leaders at the current moment. Spock gives us just a pro example of how to do that directly, but also graciously. There's not an ounce of judgment in how he does that. There's not an ounce of blame or anything. He's just saying, hey, like, I see this in you, but if you don't, then okay, right? You know, it's like there's this perfect balance, and unfortunately, I don't think we've always seen that as sort of the other side of the discernment process. Or like I have plenty of colleagues who like, that's not a kind of, there's not a level of grace in that, right? And it feels very high stakes. And so if like, if it's not a yes, then like your life is over, right? Like you have no vocation. That's just not true, right? But I think that can play out outside the church. And I think we see both of these characters just inhabit a just sort of masterful way of dealing with what can be a very challenging reality, is like figuring out your path, and that it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, and that plays out big time on the Comet.
Yes.
Where all of a sudden, Uhura, she's a cadet. She's not even out of the academy, and everyone's like, "Well, it's you. It's
You're the most qualified.
You are the expert. You are now the expert in the room."
Right.
Kirk's older brother got whammied by the thing, and
Is he okay? We like never see him again. Do we see him again?
yeah, no, I don't
He
think,
was not in the next 2 episodes. He went to Med Bay and like disappeared.
Oh, that's right. I completely forgot about
like,
that.
well, it's the Chuck effect. You know the Chuck effect from Happy Days.
No. But that's okay.
Are you guys familiar with Happy Days?
Yeah, but I don't know what Chuck is.
Well, exactly.
Maybe that's why.
That's why. It's the Chuck effect.
Teach us, Taylor.
What's his Ron Howard's character?
Richie.
Richie. Yeah, Richie.
Yeah.
Richie. Richie in the pilot episode. Richie has an older brother. His name is Chuck. He has like he has like a Letterman jacket on. He plays on the high school basketball team. He's like a few years ahead of Richie in school, and like there's like a whole scene where like Chuck's like, "Okay, I'm heading off to school. See you guys later," and you never hear or see from Chuck ever again
Because he's having a great time at school.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there are like theories that like he got drafted into Vietnam and he died, or like all of a sudden he came out of the closet and like the family excommunicated him.
Wow.
Oh, it's real dark. Like check, like listeners, if you haven't looked into the Chuck conspiracy on Happy Days, just
Or maybe it was just bad writing.
I think it was bad. It was more like bad writing.
Maybe it didn't have to be so bad.
No.
But anyway, no, we do get more Lieutenant Kirk in the show, and I think Kirk does mention his brother later, but we don't he's not like a major person.
Right.
But Uhura is the expert in the room, and I mean, one of the best parts of this episode is when Spock gives his pep talk to her, and it's garbage. And he looks at her, he says she's like, was that a pep talk? He's like, yes, I've been working on them. I've been working on them. How was it?
She's like, keep working. Yeah.
Keep working on it. But I guess the question is, my question out of the scene would be she's like a fish out of water. She doesn't know what she's doing, but she's in charge. Have you guys ever been in that situation where all of a sudden you're the expert, you're in charge? It happened to me. For a year, I worked field service for a company, and they sent me to Nebraska City, Nebraska. You know what's in Nebraska City, Nebraska?
Corn.
Nothing. Not even corn. I don't think they grow corn. When I went, there was no corn to be seen. There were fields. Everything was harvested. But I showed up, and it was like a Saturday. We were going to work over the weekend. It was like a Friday to Saturday job, and this job needed to be done by Sunday morning. And I show up on site, and there are literally 12 guys standing in a shop in a semicircle around me saying, tell us what we need to do. And I'm like, I barely know what we need to do. I need at least 5 hours to figure out what's going on. But, we all worked together. We all finished it up. I don't think I did a particularly good job of leading that crew that time. But it was really the first time when people looked at me as a man in my mid-30s and said, you're the expert, right? And that just comes, I think, with being in your mid-30s. Mm-hmm. How about you guys?
Also, your job too. You weren't like some random mid-30s guy off the street.
Well, the company picked me up in Kennedy Plaza, and they just put me on an airplane. You know?
I mean, congratulations. This is how credentials work. You know?
I'm white. That's what I'm saying. It's just that easy.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like probably I don't have a great example off the top of my head. But I think that what's interesting about this is that she felt like she was alone, but she wasn't. Because, as we keep saying, Spock was literally next to her the whole time. And when they get the break on, the music part, he's kind of the one that points it out. And I think that is more what I was sort of thinking about is, do you have the right mentors around you that let you be the expert in the room while also being you're the expert in the room, but notice how this glows right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sort of what I'm living right now in my current job with my current boss is she's very good at that. And she also works very hard at being good at that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's interesting in thinking about we can feel like we're alone and the weight of the world is on top of us, but as soon as we stop and look to our left or the right, there's actually two people standing next to us.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I mean, as someone who was just ordained in July and then plopped into a priest in charge position in a church, yeah, I feel this acutely, pretty much every day. But something I've learned about it, and I think Uhura, we see her kind of struggle with this in real time, and I think that it's very, very, very much I don't know if it's a totally Western or just sort of a U.S. sort of capitalist sort of thing, but I think when this happens and we realize, oh crap, it's me, I'm the like you said, Taylor, there's a whole circle of people looking at me and it's me, and I think for a lot of us there is this unrealistic expectation that we are supposed to know exactly what to do, then do it perfectly, then not mess anything up, then in almost I think the risk of quote unquote failure becomes, and I think we see this in Uhura, right? She's brilliant, right? She knows she can speak 37 languages, but she keeps on saying things that are signaling oh, but if I mess up, it'll be bad. If I mess up, everything will be for naught. If I mess up all of this stuff, and I think, Ivy, your point is tied to this. It's first of all, in so many cases in our life, like there is very infrequently one way, right? There's not one right way. And kind of what we talked about a little the last episode, and we'll see this more, is that often every decision, every approach, every way forward necessarily comes at a cost in one way or the other. And and leadership is often about just like looking and knowing those and going and sort of being ready for paying that cost in so many ways. And so yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. I've actually thought of Uhura many times, in my work, and when I'm plopped in front of a conversation or a situation or trying to help someone, or thinking about kind of a greater theological or social or community need in my church or with my students, and there is no clear answer, and I absolutely can sort of bop that off of friends and colleagues and mentors, but ultimately, like, I have to decide, right? I have to make the decision to do this thing, and best done not in isolation, for sure. But ultimately, owning that decision is also really important.
It really is. It's hard to be in charge, and I think it's definitely hard for folks of our age because, I don't know, we're adults, but I think we're barely adults.
Oh, yeah, no, totally. As the youngest in the room.
As I'm wearing my very fluffy, hoodie that's...
I mean, I think our generation has just normalized being comfortable. Like, it's over. We're done. We're not getting dressed up. It's over. That part of the world is not happening anymore.
Right. Sure. Also, in defense of Spock, I feel like people give him a bad rap for being so direct. But can I tell you how many times I've been in like meetings with like leadership and stuff where they'll use like super flowery language of like this will happen and that, and I'm like, I just want a real sentence. Like I want a declarative sentence.
Tell me what to do.
That's like this is what it is. So I think that I would love to have Spock as a boss because he'll be like, this is what you did right, this is what you did wrong, this is how you improve it, and you're like, thank you. This is actual useful information I can move on into my life with, which I think is useful. And also, if I'm stranding on a comet, like those are the two from the show, from my like one episode of knowledge that I want stranded with me.
Yes,
because it's Spock and Leon who's also on it. And I'm like, these are the two. This is a safe crew.
You're right. That kind of communication I do find is really, really not just helpful, but pretty critical in the leadership position, especially if you feel a little alone, and you have to sort of like create this path and or at least co-create it with people, but own it, right? But the thing is people forget that for that level, that kind of communication and directness to work, it has to be built on a basis of relationship, and a basis of trust, and a basis of, so it's like step 2. Right, you have to do the relational stuff first, and the trust, and that goes back to like the cooking thing, and the so then someone can trust you whenever you say, hey, like this might be a little hard to hear, but blah 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 blah, and then you own, and then you receive that as a gift, and but all of that is like a process, right? It doesn't just happen, because then we see what happens when people try to communicate that way outside of the context of relationship, and then they're just mean and jerks, and no one's going to hear it anyway. So.
Yeah.
See, I have the opposite of where I work. I work in engineering. So, like, everything is matter of fact and to the point, and like, this is wrong, here's why, fix it. And it's like, thanks for the peer review. I will take this knowledge, I will absorb it. I will not make that mistake again, because this is just a hard rule of existing in this world. So what I'm saying is I work with like 100 Spocks. Right. And I'm a Spock.
Right.
I don't know if I'd want 100 Spocks. I think
like we're all just
one
like,
is plenty.
I think one is really useful, but I feel like you do also need the Uhuras as well, who can give sort of like, as my mom always says, she's like, it's the softer side of Sears. Like you have the hardware, you have the like clothing, that kind of stuff.
I'm lucky. I sit adjacent to like I'm in engineering, but I sit adjacent to sales and marketing. Mm-hmm. So I get to listen to sales and marketing be nice to everybody,
right.
And then sales and marketing will come over to me and like, hey Taylor, is this possible? I'm like, no, and here's why. But we'll try. We'll try to make it. Yeah, and then they cry, they run away, get HR involved. It's a whole thing. No, but then we're like, we'll try to figure it out. That's what we tried. That's what engineers do. That's what Hammer does. Hammer is always like this. I think. Nope, that's next week's episode. I'm gonna leave it.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. But yeah, it's the Scotty effect. It's the Scotty like I need the ship to do all these things, and the ship doesn't do all these things. And Scotty says, oh, I can do it. It's going to take me 5 hours, but it can happen. But then he's done in like 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And he's like, it's all set. And it's like, Scotty's the miracle worker. And then like, it's just, you just need to understand the systems you're working in. Mm-hmm. Which they don't. And that's why they're on the Comet, because they don't understand the system.
Mm-hmm. Same, by the way. Still...
We're all in a Comet.
wildly unclear about what the music thing is, and like I appreciate it.
It's math. It's math.
I know, but I was like, oh wow, this one I didn't quite get that one. But it's a nice idea.
I loved that.
Yeah.
So I took in college a cryptography class because I had to take a math class and I wasn't going to take like a real math class.
You didn't want to take differential equations, Ivy?
No, I took cryptography. But what was really fascinating about it is our ending project was we had to make up our own code. And what me and my partner did, because I went to school for costume design and playwriting, so it had nothing to do with cryptography, is I ended up making a pleated skirt. And the code was in the skirt because we like put it into binary code, and then it was the size of the pleat is what it was, so you could do it. And that's what I think is like really interesting about like the music part, and also sort of like thinking about like the way that we do different codes is that like you can use it as a code because it is just numbers and math. And you just have to know the key. And I think that's what's interesting about it, is the problem isn't that they don't know what the code is. She figures that out like within the first 10 minutes. It's like, this is the code. It's that she doesn't have the key to understand what that actually means. And I think that's interesting to think about how we think of like language and even like translation of, because like the Bible is a translated text.
Absolutely.
So like, how have we translated these texts? Did we do it correctly? Did we have sort of like the key to do the correct translation? Right. That went off on a weird tangent.
Well, that brings up a great tangent into the next part of the show that we need to talk about, the Comet itself. The shepherds. The shepherds come on the screen and they say, "We are the shepherds," and Pike is like, "The shepherds," and the comms officers are like, that's how the universal translation. That's what the universal translators got. This
is what we got, man.
And he's like, okay, and then but like, so the comet is told by the shepherds. The comet has agency. Mm-hmm. The comet has always been. The comet always will be. If the comet chooses to run into this planet, then that is its choice. If the comet chooses to spare the planet, that is its choice. We are here to shepherd the comet along its preordained route.
Right.
And these people are like those folks in the seminary who are, I am here. I am here because I am like word perfect to the book. This is what the book says. This is what we're doing. This is how we live. And this also talks about, brings up the point of like the subtext of this A or B storyline. Everything happens for a reason.
My least favorite phrase in all of Christianity. Yes.
So take a deep dive and everything happens for a reason. Why do you dislike that, Drake?
Okay, so this is just, a profoundly theological episode. It just hits on so many things, but one thing, especially the comet, which there's a name, Mahadi, is that right?
Mahanit.
Mahanit, that's right.
Don't call it the comet.
So yeah, right, exactly. So they're like, please
Mahanit.
don't. Mahanit is, so the comet has not only agency but a name, and that you would say, like, if it has a name, then it must have a self, right? And so in these ideas about Mahanit will do what Mahanit will do, and will give life and take life, and blah, blah, blah. And so it's a clear, analogy for God. And in what we would start to say from a theological language, we would start to get into what we would call the doctrine of providence, right? That God is ultimately in control of our reality, of the universe, of creation, and all of these things. And, that is sort of an undeniable truth when we look scripturally, when we look in our, tradition of influential writers and theologians. And it's a really nice idea to when things aren't hard, to say, what a great idea, right? Everything happens for a reason. God is in control. God's got this. God's blah, 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 right? The doctrine of providence is probably, and a professor of mine in seminary pointed this out, and I agree with him profoundly, is that the doctrine of providence is probably the most dangerous theology we have, in the sense that to not handle it well is to do tremendous harm. And I think it's not hard for us to see what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. And we are, you can be in a pastoral setting, and this probably has happened in everyone's life, right, around this table, is when something really terrible happens, you lose a loved one, or there's a tragedy, or there's a natural disaster, or there's a whatever. All of a sudden, something like everything happens for a reason is not particularly helpful, because then the very reasonable question after that is, well, then what's the reason for this? Why on earth would a good and loving God have a reason for this? And it's not so much of a cop-out, but that's why I never say that. Mostly because I think that we are far out of our league whenever we start to try to do things like assign reason or rationality to God, because that means we start to pretend that we are capable of doing such things, which by definition we are not. If we are creatures, if we are those who are created by God, then we are in fact not God. That can't be true. So, the comet is a really great metaphor here for, I think, like the mystery of providence. And I think for some of our doctrines and some of our theological hot buttons, it's okay to sort of let things be mysterious, and not need to figure them out. And again, that kind of sounds like a cop out, but I would rather err on the side of copping out than doing harm. And I think theologically there is space for humility, where we can say, this feels like the most right thing, and I don't quite get the full picture, and that's okay. And hopefully somewhere down the road in some existence, I will get it, and that will be very satisfying. But right now I don't. So the comet really is this really perfect analogy for God does stuff, and we don't always know why. And maybe all that stuff isn't actually God doing it, right? It's just the reality of how our reality is. So all to be said, we just have to be careful, I think, as Christians about how we speak about God, because some of these things are actually not true. For God to be perfectly good, God must also be just. For God to be perfectly benevolent, God must also be, merciful, right? So there's a lot of things that we have to balance here, and so it's important. It's important that we do that carefully.
I have a different question.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm wondering, based on your studying, what the biblical definition of a shepherd is. What does that sort of look like? Because I feel like we have so much there's Good Shepherd Sunday. There's
Jesus is the shepherd. The shepherds come to the manger. The shepherds are the...
Yeah, but it's also interesting because I feel like the shepherds that come to the manger are not well liked, but then you have Jesus as the shepherd, and that's a good thing because he's taking care of the flock. So I'm just wondering, I think even within the Bible, shepherd has a lot of different definitions. And do you think that's also part of the thing where they like had a hard time translating this word, and shepherd felt like the only thing that was all encompassing enough to explain who these people are?
So many ideas here. Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I think for the last part, I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm not a linguist. I did not take Greek. Like all that stuff. But I think, like any sort of temporal text, the biblical text was written at a time, right, and markedly not any time recently. Shepherds would have been a very easy image, right, for people to have grasped, and this is also where we run into trouble, I think, in biblical interpretation today, where there are images or thoughts or sort of ways of being that pretty easily offend modern sensibility, and so it's tempting to sort of say, oh well, like how anachronistic and terrible, and like we should just avoid that. And I understand that impulse, but we miss out on a whole heck of a lot of good stuff when we can't allow ourselves to like inhabit the mind and the reality of the people who wrote the text, right? And so like, yes, that would not work today, but like, and so even today, like we don't have a lot of shepherds running around, and so we don't, and to your point, Ivy, the shepherd profession was like very lowly, they were almost kind of like, I don't know, like, well, they were out in a field for most of the year with smelly animals, so they like smelled, right? It was not glamorous, but also like there was sort of like vagrant kind of sort of. This was not like a profession of high esteem, right? But everyone would have known it, and so I think the shepherd thing is just like an interesting idea, contextually and culturally, and that's a great example of like how we also need to be careful about how we're thinking about biblical text and scripture. The question of like, who is the shepherd? And this is really a great episode in this regard too. And we have sort of a pre-show, like a show note question about like, who are we, right? Are we the shepherds or are we Starfleet? And so one thing to think about, at least from a biblical standpoint, is that the only shepherding we are called to do as people is to each other, right? And so there, I think, is an instructive point here about the shepherds from the show who take it upon themselves to, like, in a sense, like, shepherd God. Or we could maybe take it a step forward to, like, shepherd a church or an institution or something like that. And we see kind of what happens whenever we take it upon ourselves to think that like we are capable of doing that, or there's any ability for us to do that. And of course the church needs shepherding and tending and caring and leading, and like, yes, like I'm banking a career on that, right? But this idea that God needs shepherding or protecting, I think, is a really great thing to say here instead, is where we start to get into a lot of trouble. We see this institutionally in churches throughout history where they just do theological and social acrobatics to like protect their understanding of God, and like somehow if God will be sort of like hurt or diminished or something, and so they will do terrible things like to sort of prevent this from happening. My deep understanding of God is that like God's going to be fine, like God can handle it. God is God. So the shepherding thing, I think we can think about in a couple of different directions. But I do think we are called as Christians to mimic, in so many ways, but especially in this way, mimic the sort of shepherding behavior of Christ, right? Who says we do kind of want to keep the flock together, right? As much as possible, we are better when we are together, as difficult as that might be to believe sometimes. And it's sort of this like layers, this like grades of shepherding. Like we are ultimately shepherded by God. There are things within our control that we are called to shepherd or be shepherded in ways. But ultimately, like we aren't responsible for God, right? We're responsible for what we do in the name of God. And I think that's where, again, we need to be careful.
So in keeping with the whole Pike, like this season teaching Pike to understand his fate, what do we think that this mission teaches Pike about not preordained, like predestination? Like the whole point of the episode is that the comet was never going to hit the planet. The comet gave us the intention. It told us its intent, though we didn't understand the intent yet. It was only after the fact that we decided that, or found that we learn how it's only after the fact that we learn that it was never going to hit the planet.
But we still had to intervene.
Yes.
That's a key part of it.
But the intervening was always in the plan.
Well, exactly. So it's circular.
Yeah, it's circular. But there's a difference between saying the comet was never going to hit the planet and saying the comet was never going to hit the planet as long as Spock did these 6 steps.
Correct. So what I love about this episode is that it doesn't try to solve the mystery, right? I mean, this is ultimately why it is such a great analogy for the doctrine of providence, is that it says, here's how maybe all of this, here are the parts of how all of this works. Like maybe God does use us, right? I mean, we are used as agents in creation for God's will. And this, like Spock's intervention is a perfect example. And I just like the scene where, they get the data back from the comet and the shape of the comet that gets shaved off so that it changes its course, matches the shape of what Spock actually shaved off the comet. And it's sort of this like, oh wow, like quite literally like, oh my God, and it's so what I love, but it never tries to
explain why.
Go further, right?
It's just like this happened,
everyone walks away being like,
that was weird.
Whoa, like this is pretty incredible, and it is pretty incredible, right? I mean, and that's why, I mean, when I say things like sometimes we need to just like let mysteries be what they are, it is because of that, right? Not because it's not worth thinking about. It's worth thinking about always and contemplating, praying about, and playing around with, but we are also gifted in sort of letting ourselves bask in the mystery of part of the mystery in which we are wrapped up and created to be part of, and in some ways are co-creators with God, and we miss out on some of the benefit of that whenever we spend all of our time and energy trying to figure it out. Sometimes it's the best thing to do to sit back and be like, this is really cool. Like, this is really cool that I get to do this and I don't have to understand how it works. Yeah. That's a huge benefit of Christian discipleship for me.
Well, I think what's so cool about the ending of this episode is we end with a baptism pretty much. We end with this life-giving rain, which is pretty much what a baptism is. It's just we put it in a pond instead of like let it fall from the sky. And I think looking at like the whole Venn diagram of this episode of like you have the comet's preordained, but Spock needed to intervene. The shepherds were right that they shouldn't just blow it out of the sky, that they needed to let the comet sort of have its space and move it. Pike was right in that, okay, we need to let it happen, but we also can't let it kill all these people. And with all of this working together, it ends with actually saving the people on the planet. And I just wonder, like, what do you think that means about how we use Christianity in our life? Because I feel like there are days where I'm like Spock, where it's like, okay, like I need to move this little piece of like Christian theology to like fit what I'm doing today, but like it still keeps it whole overall. There's days where I feel like we're the shepherd. There's days where I think everyone has those days where they're just like angry and like Pike and are like, well, let's just blow it up because it's going to kill us anyways. And how do you think that sort of interconnects? And is it healthy to have all of those quadrants?
In sort of a funny way, I think Jesus sort of answers this question early. In saying things like, when you enter a town, go there to do what you were there to do. And if people don't buy it, just go. Dust, kick the dust off your feet and go and keep moving and keep doing. And so there's, what in your question, what I hear is sort of this, in what the shepherds in the episode, I think really sort of encapsulate is, this kind of like zealot, sort of fundamentalist sort of flavor that we have seen time and time and time and time again. By the way, fundamentalism exists on both extremes, left and right. I need to make sure I say that very clearly. Neither of which are generally super productive. But so I think what we see here is the hitch that happens when people leave no room for questions, right? And when they think that the validity and the vitality of their faith only exists as insofar as everyone else agrees, right? And what I see from Jesus from the beginning is that was never the point, right? He knew from the beginning that what he was doing was going to be an underdog thing, that it might not be the thing everybody always does. Going and making disciples of all nations, you can think of that a couple ways. You can go and saying, I'm going to make sure that everyone in every nation becomes indoctrinated with my belief, or you can say, I'm going to visit every nation and see what I can do, and maybe like not be so crazy about it. We see between the shepherds and Pike, and I think your term of Venn diagram is perfect here, an equal measure of sort of what I see as a healthy, to situate ourselves in a healthy way in our live faith, evangelism, all of these things, how we let our faith influence the world around us, and our own interior life, is that it does require this Venn diagram of commitment, belief, faith, trust, but with an equally healthy dose of humility. Humility and openness, and knowing that none of us really gets it ultimately, and that the best that we can do is to sort of go forward on this path that we have been convinced of. I do believe the gospel does like grab hold of people, right? Mm-hmm. And that there is this sort of clear through line that in a supernatural way, people are like, wow, I just like, this is it. Like, this is it. But there is always room for feedback, interaction, reconsidering, all these things without losing the plot, right? And I think that's what we see in this tussle. And I can't remember, I think we have the note here. Perhaps in the future you won't be so quickly to judge the religion of others, right? Mm-hmm. And we all need to hear that. We can be equally committed to our faith and our stance and our posture toward God and toward the world. And it not necessarily have to be at the expense of someone else's truth, right? Mm-hmm. And I just love, again, this show does such a great job of honing in on really, really pernicious, sticky, risky problems and going as far as it can to say something helpful about them, and then letting the rest sort of just be what it is. And I think that's exactly what this episode has done for something as like hard and difficult as like the doctrine of providence, that like, yes, God is the creator and in control. And that's about as far as we got,
And I think it's also interesting too, when you talk about how like everyone kind of just is like, okay, that makes sense, and then like sort of walks out of that comm room, is like, even Spock, who again, like, he's the science guy, everything sort of like has to make some type of logical sense. And even he's able to sort of be like, all right, and like sort of walk away with it too. And I think that sort of shows that like all of them can be right. The shepherds can be right, Pike can be right, the Comet can be right, and no one has to get hurt within that. And actually it can bring life when you let all three of them be right.
It shows a subset of thinking about the difference between rightness and truth, right? Truth, I think, is this sort of ineffable thing that is real, that like flows around in our existence, and we can be right and wrong about truth. But it is a necessary subset of what truth actually is. Like truth, it can be known, but it can't be controlled, right? And so yes, in their own ways, they are right, and yet they walk away knowing the truth, which is not the same thing. It's bigger than any rightness or wrongness in some ways.
Did you have anything else in your notes?
Not that's necessary. I mean, in a like logistical way, it can be healthy for people to like remember that God exists like in the past, present, and future at the same time. But that's like a whole like theological rabbit hole. We don't need to like get. I don't think we need that.
Not today.
That's like a brain melty thing that we don't necessarily. I think
Like if we want to get into time and space and
right.
We'll do Doctor Who next season.
Theology of time. Great one.
Overall, I think this is just a generally great episode of Star Trek. It's fun. It's interesting. Stakes are high, but there aren't really any stakes at all.
Good one-liners.
Great one-liners.
Great one.
I'm gonna preach on some of this. I know at some point. I mean, it's just low-hanging fruit here.
It's just that it's like that moment, like I said off mic earlier, like when like in the pre-title sequence where like, hey, there's a comet, we gotta move it. We get to move a comet today, and Pike leans over to Una and says like, I love this job. Like this is what we're doing today. We're gonna retrofit a whole bunch of torpedoes, and we're gonna shoot them at this thing, and we're not even gonna blow it up. We're gonna slide it out of the water. You're just gonna slide it over a little bit.
He says, technically speaking, we did not touch the comet.
Yes.
Which is so like ministry, it's just like so how ministry feels most days. It's like technically speaking, like we're not gonna tell someone to do that thing or like force anyone to do it, but we are gonna like, we're gonna interact in some way that we hope will end up.
Yeah,
doing
I mean
something.
it's like I mean not to cross the streets, but it's kind of like that line from Futurama in the episode Godfellas, where the God Nebula says, if you do something right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a really great way to sum up this whole episode.
Any last thoughts?
The only thing I have is that if anybody wants to hear more about Everything Happens for a Reason, we do have a previous episode from our bumper sticker Bible season that we did talk about this. It's Father Nick Avancho episode, and it's just called Father Nick Avancho, Everything Happens for a Reason. That's just another episode where we kind of talk about this, and we only talk about Everything Happens for a Reason. So,
And didn't you do a Futurama episode?
I did, and that we also did an episode of Futurama around Goodfellas with Reverend Tanya Watt.
Yes.
We miss Reverend Tanya Watt a lot.
I don't think you can actually have that in the episode.
Why? I'll write it down.
Because that makes it sound like she died. She didn't die. She
She
got a
didn't.
different job.
All right, she moved to Reno she moved to Reno with Tim.
Awesome.
Anyway.
So thank you, Drake, for being with us today. If someone wanted to connect with you in this space-time continuum, how would they do that?
What a great ask. I hope now and forever into the eschaton. Let's hang out forever. I am the vicar at St. Augustine's Episcopal Church in Kingston, Rhode Island. That's on the campus of University of Rhode Island, and there I also serve as the Episcopal chaplain to the school. Hit us up. We have services Sundays at 9:30. I have campus programming Wednesday evenings. Socials and website are sort of in flux, so just give us a good Google. That's probably the best way at the moment to get in touch.
I'm going there to see my father. I'm going there no more to roam. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home. I'm going see my Savior, to sing his praise forevermore. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home.
Thank you for listening to Tea Time Theology, a ministry of St. John's Cathedral in Rhode Island. We would like to thank our producers, Ivy Swinsky and Taylor Wilkie. Special thanks to Mario Akande and David Hines for this season's music. Additionally, we would like to thank our sponsor, the Episcopal Diocese of Rhode Island, and the Right Reverend Nicholas Knisley, as well as our guests today. Follow us at Tea Time Theology on all social medias.